John, have I told you I'm addicted to Carwell's auctions?
You might have mentioned it, yeah.
Well, they're online 6 days a week. They're getting 20,000 fresh vehicles in every month. It's actually one of my best sources of quality stock. Listings have got plenty of photos, service history, and background checks for peace of mind. And you can pay sellers in a click with Carwell Wallet. They even transport your car with built-in protection of up to £25,000.
Well, that's more than you will ever need.
Exactly, John. So, dealers, if you're not on CarWow, you really should get in on the auction. See what I've done, John?
Oh, God.
Anyway, to find out more, sign up for free at carwow.co.uk/partners/auctions.
Welcome back to the Car Dealer Podcast, where we pick our favourite stories of the week and ask an industry guest to choose which were the best. I'm John Ray, and joining me this week, it's our esteemed editor and collector of small Korean cars, James Packett.
Actually sold all those, John, so I haven't got any of those in stock. But if you want a nice Japanese SUV, I'm your man. Many of those.
Is that what you're calling the Jimny, an SUV? I suppose it is.
Yeah, it is. No, I was thinking more of the Nissan Qashqais that I can't sell for love nor money.
Right.
So, yeah, if you want one of those, that's fine. How are you, John?
I'm very well. We've had a busy week, haven't we? I was thinking before this podcast, what have we been doing all week? What's my anecdote for the week? And really, it's that I've watched an edit of you saying, and the winner of Car Dealer Power 2025 is about 900 times, and I've been waking up in the middle of the night going, paint protection product of the year. Just in my brain now.
Sorry, John. But yes, a big week for us, Car Dealer Power. I'm sure we'll come on to that when we talk about our stories. But yeah, nice to finally get that one out the door, isn't it? It's always a little bit of a relief when the edit is done and the stories have been written and published. Do you want to hear some well, I don't know, terrible anecdotes from me for the week?
Sure.
Excellent. I'll let you know. Well, I've had a real experience this week with the new generation of car buyers. You know, not.
What do you mean, like young people?
Yes, it's exactly what I mean, John.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean Gen Z. I mean,
why are you talking like, I don't know, an Auto Trader report?
Well, well, because it certainly felt like it. Because this new generation of car buyer certainly doesn't like to talk to other human beings. This person only conversed via WhatsApp, and that was only at periods after 4 p.m. in the day, possibly for around 5 to 6 minutes, which has meant doing a finance deal with this customer has been the hardest thing we've ever done. It's been very, very difficult. We at one stage we said, when we actually did finally speak to him, we said, look, you really do need to answer your phone. Like, the finance company has called you 3 times today and they now think this is fraud. So it's probably worth you answering the call, which he eventually did. And we think we might be dropping off his car on Monday. But it was a little bit of an eye-opener, if I'm honest, John. Very, very different way of doing business with slightly younger buyers. But what else has been happening? Can I tell you about this new thing that I've been using called Cazoo, which I've used it much to my to some success this week. It's a
where's that name come? That name rings a bell.
Let me explain. It's a used car valuations platform that used to be called Cazoo, and Cazoo was sold for £25 million to Cazoo, the used car retailer that collapsed. I'm sure we'll come on to that in today's podcast. But spun out of that was this data insights business called Cazoo. It's very similar to CAP in that it looks at the used car market, but the way it gets its data is slightly different. It looks at all of the different adverts that are on all of the different platforms, on every single platform at the moment. They said to me that they've got something something like 800,000 or 1 million records they've got in this system, but you might be wondering, how's it different? Well, I was using it this week when to value a Mitsubishi Shogun, John, that I've purchased from quite a long way away.
Late 90s, by the sounds of it.
Quite a long way away. But yeah, I was looking at this car and it was listed on CarWow with no service history. And I was thinking that's a little bit weird because the car looked absolutely immaculate. So checked it out on Cazoo. And what you can do is you can look at the vehicle history. It's got like a vehicle history tab. And what it does is it pulls through all of the last adverts that car has ever had. So like it went back something, I think I looked back something like 8 years. So every time this car's been advertised, you can find the advert, which
Mm.
was particularly useful because 7 years ago it said it had been advertised with full main dealer service history. And then I actually found that the guy who was selling it on CarWow had tried to sell it privately 3 weeks ago, found the advert and all the text and listed it with full service history. So obviously this put off all the other buyers, managed to get myself a little bit of a bargain, but yeah, found a newfound love for this system, this Picasso system, because I mean, it's great to be able to get valuations, but you can get them in lots of different places, as you know. But that sort of detective work help that you need when buying a used car was really, really useful.
I like that. That reminds me of what I do on Zoopla, and now another Alex Chesterman product there, by the
Obviously,
way.
yeah.
But you get the listings of what a house went up for and what it looked like. You get the old photos of it and all that sort of stuff, and you can kind of be like, oh yeah, I could see it. Had the double glazing done then, and
particularly useful, yeah, for that. But the only problem is the Mitsubishi is in just north of Edinburgh. It's in Kinross, so it's quite a long way to bring it back.
It's a very fuel efficient car, the Mitsubishi Shogun,
exactly.
So I'm sure it won't cost much to get down.
Just before we talk to our esteemed guest, we should talk a little bit about our podcast live, John, which is coming up in the not too distant future. We did say at the end of last week's podcast we would talk about it. We've got Vicky Hart from Waylands, who is going to be one of our guests. We've got another guest lined up. I won't spoil that because we'll be announcing that next week. But it takes place on September the 24th in Oxfordshire. What's the hotel called?
I have to remember it like Millhouse from Simpsons, so it's Milton Hill House.
Excellent. It's a great way of, firstly, that's a great insight into your mind, John.
Yeah.
But also a great way of remembering it. But yes, that will be taking place. We've got getting together loads of people from the motor trade. It's a little bit of a social, bit of a kind of end of summer barbecue, but also they'll have to listen to terrible anecdotes like this one in person, which is not exactly a great advert, is it?
No, it's not. But I will say it's it's probably my favourite event that we do because unlike all the others, I get to sit down for about an hour and a half. It's lovely. That's Perfect. All I do. Just sit there in a chair
and talk.
Yeah.
But let's introduce our guest because I just have to say what we said slightly off air a moment ago when we said, Richard, you're just going to have to just sit there and listen to a couple of minutes of us prattling on.
2 minutes, I said.
2 minutes, yeah. And Richard's response was, it often feels like a lot longer than 2 minutes.
So, 7 minutes in, joining us this week is Richard Ennis, CEO of dealer group Head In UK. Richard, thanks for joining us, and sorry for taking 3 times longer to say all that.
No, that's fine. Thank you for inviting me on. I think that probably Ant and Deck are safe for now.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
but you might have noticed for anyone watching the videos of this, I always put me on the left and James on the right. So we're very much like Ant and Deck.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, indeed. I did spend some time in Newcastle this week. So, maybe I'm sort of closely there. Richard, anyway, nice to see you. Thank you very much for joining us. I mean, firstly, let's just start a little bit with the business. Tell people a little bit about how Head in the UK is set up now.
Yeah, so principally we've got 2 retail groups with 2 great brands. So BMW and Mercedes-Benz, and of course we've got Mini alongside BMW, and we've got Smart in Mercedes-Benz. So it's a really nice, I describe it as a really nice size. So both divisions employ around 374 people, 75 people. So I think it's that kind of size where you can really afford to make it personal. And really build a strong culture, and that's the sort of thing that we really enjoy doing. So I think it's a great size. It's quite a small part, really, of what is a really big global organisation based out in the Nordics and in Germany, Switzerland, and places like that. So I think the parent company, operates in 7-8 different countries, 42 different brands, employing around 12,500 people. So. We're a small part of that, but lovely people to work with.
It must be nice having that sort of backup. Do they get involved at all? Is it nice to be able to pull on that sort of expertise?
We get a lot of breathing space, I would say that. And myself and our CFO, Peter Williams, who is a lovely guy. I've worked with Peter for a long time, and I think we're pretty much empowered to get on with it. And I think that we obviously spend time each quarter in board meetings with Anders Hedin and the team over there. But no, I think we really enjoy it. We enjoy the freedom of it, and we're connected to a large group, and we can pull on that resource if we need it. But it's amazing, to think how I appreciate we all do the same job, don't we? We sell cars, parts, and hours as franchise retailers, but it's amazing to me. I think the thing I've learned in the last 2 years is just how different those countries and markets are actually.
What give me an example of that then? I mean, it's like, where do you see the biggest differences?
It can be the way that you might read a set of accounts, how you would interpret gross profit, some of the nuances of operating in different countries, different cultures, and it's just quite different.
Richard, tell us a little bit about your background then. How did you get into the motor trade?
Oh, crikey. It's not so interesting, but I will tell you, as you've asked. I grew up in Doncaster. All roads, I always say, lead to Doncaster. So I was at home doing a university degree and used to work part-time in a local hotel pub, which I think to date is probably the best job I've ever had. I really enjoyed that. But it was full of motor traders. You'd see these guys walking in literally with briefcases full of wads of money, and every time they bought a round of drinks, they just pull out this 8-inch wad, and just like it was just So you used to see the briefcases, the money, and just looked like a really interesting life. But I can't tell you how many. They were all, whether they were sort of used car traders or whether they owned their own used car dealership or whether they worked for a franchise retailer. And so 2 years into my degree, I was invited to go and help sell cars at Bramley Motor Company just near Rotherham, actually, and that was through one of our clients at the pub, one of our punters, and so I spent 6 weeks there, and I really enjoyed it. I wouldn't say that I was particularly good at it, but they wanted to keep me on. I went home and told my parents and said, I'm not going to do my third year of degree course. I'm going to go and work in what was a really nice backstreet garage, and that didn't go down particularly well. Yeah. And I did that for a while, and then a family friend heard about it, and he was a sales manager in a Renault business. He gave me a job for about 12 months. And I wasn't particularly good at selling cars, believe it or not. And I always remember on my 21st birthday, the team at Renault bought me a card, and it said, you might well be able to open this, but I bet you can't close it, which was... ouch.
Ow.
And then somebody else from the pub, a guy called John Welsh, he was a sales manager for Pendragon in Honda Sheffield, and he gave me a job, and that actually went well. I joined Pendragon when I was 21-ish and spent 10 years there. Really enjoyed that, and we parted ways in the end. I went to Jardine Motors for 6 years. And after 16 years of being in a PLC, I became quite disillusioned, I would say, because I think the nature of the beast is it's just quite cyclical. So everybody kind of changes every 3 or 4 years, and then you work out that's more to do with market cycles than it is the actual pedigree and ability of people. So I became quite disillusioned and figured, you know what? I was pretty good at running businesses, and I had decided that the benefits would be far greater if I could find a really nice owner to connect with and help to run his businesses. And that's when I got introduced to a chap called Ben Collins, who owned Stephen James BMW in the London boroughs. He had 4 retailers. And so I went to Enfield, and do you know what? Like, we just had the best time. Performance was great. Our relationship was great connection, some lovely people. You could never have odds how well that was going to go. So essentially, then Ben decided that he would set up a management buyout for us. Myself and Peter Williams headed up the management buyout, and that was in 2018, late 2018. And then we ended up selling in 2023 to Anders Hedin, which was never the plan really, but I guess timing is everything ultimately.
What an incredible story! I mean, I'm amazed. This pub, it sounds like the LinkedIn of the North. it's clearly worked well for you, isn't it?
Yeah. It was. I think. Do you know what? That is a little bit about maybe putting yourself out there and just making friends, and you never know where that might go. And it could have been full of lawyers, couldn't it? I'm not sure how well that would have gone, but it wasn't. It was full of motor retailers, and no, it's great. I mean, it's really colourful when you look back, but I think that's life sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, the motor trade it's certainly full of characters, isn't it? Give us a little bit of idea then of how business is at the moment. I mean, what are you seeing?
I think that automotive is. Lots of people will say it's really tough, and coming out of 2020 to 23, where everybody just hit record profits, whether you're an OEM or a retailer, you were certainly having a good time of it, and I think that that's clouded everybody's expectation. I think if you were to go back to 2019, when things were particularly tough and a real hard push market, I think that was one thing. But what I would say is that I'd be like, right now, I think I would be saying, don't mistake this particular period for a market cycle. I think it's an absolute shift. And I think that in the next 5 to 8 years, I think that automotive for OEMs and for retailers will look significantly different. And I think that's because, this mandated move to electric is causing OEMs and retailers to bleed quite heavily. And I think you might say tongue-in-cheek that the government have U-turned and rolled back on a number of their pledges since they were voted in. And I think that the ZEV mandate will be one of them, but I think it's a question of when, and not if. But I think that needs to happen sooner rather than later, because I really do think it's causing some real strain in both business models. And if you think about an OEM for a sec, it's like, geez, you've invested hundreds of billions into new platforms being electric, and you can't command those returns back through RRPs because consumers aren't prepared to pay them. So then you've got to discount heavily, and that really wasn't in your business model. And if you're in a traditional sales structure and not agency, then as a retailer, you're wearing the cost of push. If you're an OEM that's got agency, you're not only wearing the cost of a much lower RRP, but you've then got to push that car out as well. And so you can see where it starts to really cause some strain and starts to creak. Add in US tariffs that gives you production headaches as an OEM. Add in the fact that you just can't sell anywhere near the volume that you used to sell into China if you're a legacy German OEM. What do you do with all that production? And if you put that and flood the European and UK markets, well, they're already pushing. So at what point does that become a problem? And I think, just to top it all off, you've got this kind of like over-invested UK franchise network. I think there are just now too many retailers. And why would I say that? Well, I would say that because it's becoming harder and harder to pull on GP levers. That they're pretty flat. I think if you're half sensible at what you do, whether it be in after sales or sales, there isn't anything material that you can pull on anymore to increase GP significantly. And you can be sure that cost base will only continue to increase. I think the stat is something like 36 to 40% compound inflation since 2020. So if you start to look at salaries, energy costs, rents and rates, they've been particularly inflationary over the last 5 years. And so you just have to ask the question, well, if I'm certain that those will continue to rise, and they will, and I'm pretty clear that it's going to be really hard to create more GP, then you would, I think, see a natural shrinkage of retailer networks so that the revenue still remains, but it just goes into fewer businesses. And that then creates long-term sustainability for retailers, which is ultimately what OEMs want. So I think I would look more at that macro picture and say, geez, there's no wonder it's tough.
No, absolutely. I mean, that does, yeah. I mean, it's certainly given an insight into what it's like out there. The other thing I'm interested in getting your opinion on, and just some understanding of how you're finding it, is the agency model. You've got two brands, haven't you? You've obviously got Mercedes and BMW, two big brands.
Yeah.
Very similar sort of products, very similar sorts of manufacturers, but one of them operating under agency. We actually have heard some good things about Mercedes model. I mean, what's your take on it, and how does it work for you?
Yeah, I mean, look, these opinions are my own, so they wouldn't be the opinions of either of those OEMs. They're great partners to work with, I would say that. Brilliant brands, great products. What I would say about agency, in my own opinion, is I think that's for retailers, by the way, a really protective, healthy layer that protects you against pushing in a really difficult market. Because not only are you pushing in a difficult market, got a really cautious consumer, got a flat economy that doesn't show any signs of growing anytime soon. And so, transactions are harder to come by. Add in EV, where customers are way more inquisitive, particularly cautious. And to get somebody over the line, you really do need to push by way of incentive and deals. So, I think the OEM wears that in an agency model. That's great for retailers because actually you can forecast, it's more sustainable, and I do think customers like single price point. I would say that. Whereas if you're in a non-agency, so if you're in the traditional sales model, then you're wearing that cost of push in a far greater way. And new car margins, never before have they been under more pressure, I would say that. And I think not only then are you competing with other brands, and by the way, when you look at the 2019 market of 2 million registrations, and you look at the 2024 market and 25, which were pretty similar, so maybe at 1.9, maybe 1.95, there are 72 brands competing in 2025, and there were like 40 in 2019. So if you think it's actually hyper competitive, but not only are you competing with other brands, but you also compete with your own retailers because you're so desperate for volume. So ultimately you can see how heavily you can drive down the new car margin, and that is as a real concern. But you don't get that in an agency model, do you? For all the obvious reasons. But what I find interesting about that, and nobody really knows the stats, but I think that if you look at capital markets, they would much rather back an OEM that's got the ability to generate great levels of cash. And if you're in the agency model, well, lots of your cash is soaked up in inventory. So it becomes harder to generate cash. And I don't think money markets particularly like that. So, and it'd be fascinating to see how well agency works, wouldn't it, for an OEM? Because was it really in the business model that it would cost so much to push? And I think the other thing I would say, James, when I answer that question is that, the world of the OEM is so different, like remarkably so, compared to the retailer. And I think it's really difficult as an OEM to transition into a retailer. And I think that's why you see such a long, drawn-out headache. It takes quite a long time to adjust. And I wasn't in the Mercedes-Benz network when they went live with the agency, and only picked it up, when it was going well. But I think if you look back at the stats in 23, it was really difficult for retailers. And I think if you look at the Australian data, it was equally as difficult for them when they transitioned. But if you look at, you wouldn't believe, would you, that if you're a retailer, could you really get your head into the world of shipping and logistics and all those kind of things, that the headaches that production brings, and equally for them trying to become a retailer or think like a retailer? I think if you're going to go agency, then really the speed of transition is your greatest asset. The longer it takes, the more difficult it becomes.
What would you think if all of the brands you represented went agency? Would you be happier if they were all agency?
As a retailer, I'm a big agency advocate. I would say that, and I've liked the model for a long time. I think that the truth is, if you're a franchise retailer, I think every 10 years you get two really good ones, and so you might experience a pull market. 2 years out of 10, but the other eight, like you're pushing, and that's super expensive. It's a real pressure. And do you know that there must be a better way of doing things than scraping to each quarter end? And if you ask the OEMs, they'd say the same. It's not much fun, and because you're trying to achieve an unnatural volume, aren't you? You have to be if you're pushing that hard.
Why do you think the industry then has got a bit of negativity towards agency?
I don't really know who is negative towards it. I certainly think the consumer isn't. I don't think the retailer is. So I'm not sure. I'm not really aware of too much negativity. I just think that, when you go back to when this all became, some things just become in vogue, James, don't they? One or two AMs start to talk about it, one or two do it. There's a clamour then to think, we must do that. But I think a lot of these business plans must have been born out of that COVID period where just everything was inflationary, literally. Margins, salaries, everything. It was just a moment in time that I don't think will ever come again. But it would be naive to write a business plan at a time like that, because it just wasn't realistic. And I think that, I don't know. I do think the transition is really testing for OEMs and for retailers when you switch. That would be my experience. But I think once you're there and once it's settled down, it works really well. And I tell you what it is really good for is if you're in, I mean, we're in the London boroughs, so you can imagine our AOIs are pretty punchy. And so maybe if you're out in the Lake District, it might be different. And if you're on the East Coast, it might be different. But I think that if you're in Birmingham, Manchester, London, and you've got lots of customers around, and you've got a pretty dense AOI, I think agency is great. I do, and I think ask a customer. I mean, do they prefer single price point? I reckon definitely. And if you look at the data from Bain and Co, actually, I think they're a global research company. That I think they said the same, and I think they get their reach in terms of consumer data is far greater than any of ours could be. And I think that everybody would say single price point is something that they enjoy.
I could probably talk about agency all day, but I won't bore you with too many questions on that front. But let's move on to the used car market. I mean, how's that faring up for you at the moment? I'm hearing mixed things from the dealers I'm talking to. Some people saying it's got a little bit quieter. What's your take on it?
I think the used car arena is more stable. I think that clearly there's a shortage of used car stock, and that's something that we've all commented on in the last 12 to 18 months. I think that it's just a really hyper competitive space, isn't it? And so it sort of brings out different KPIs for us, because actually speed of sale is probably our most important barometer, which means you've largely got 30 days to make a healthy margin. Well, and if particularly with cosmetic, it's 7 to 10 days to prepare, and you'd ideally like it in 6 or 7. But like anyone that's doing wheels and cosmetic and mechanical prep, I think 7 days is a big ask. We keep working hard towards that, but then that gives you, like, let's say you do it in 7 days, you've got 23 days to make a really good margin on a car. And I think that's the bit that's tough. And then even when you sell it, you've got to buy another one back with the right car with the right margin. It's just an ongoing. I think the used car arena is really stable. It's pretty consistent. I think it will always be tough. Everybody's into data-led pricing. There just aren't enough of them around, and I think it will never be easy, will it? But I think if you're really concentrated in that used car space, you can do fairly well. But I don't think you're going to just fly overnight on any of the things that we've got in automotive anymore. So I think used cars will just be hard work, but if you put the hard work in, see, the thing about used cars is it's formulaic, really, and that's what data-led pricing brings you. And so whereas I think if you look at new car and the new car arena, that's just sheer hard graft and some luck and all those kind of things. But I think used cars are more formulaic, more reliable, more consistent. But I don't see anybody doubling their used car profits overnight.
What part of the job do you love the most?
Definitely people. And it's like, well, why would I say that? Well, do you know what? I think one of the best times we had was when we owned Stephen James, and we owned it for 5 years. And we got ourselves to a point, this is genuinely true, no spin and no hype, but we got our attrition rate to like 18%, which I think within the London boroughs is brilliant. And I think that we're also particularly proud of being number 1 2 years running for after sales customer service scores. And again, being in the London boroughs, it kind of dispelled that myth, really, that it's hard to operate in London. I think we disproved that. I think that, we built a contact center where you could, like, literally, and this all comes down to people that are like, how do you make a brilliant business? And it's at its core, it's just really, people talk about brilliant basics, but if you can just pick up the phone within 4 or 5 seconds, if you can be happy to hear from your customer, delighted that they called, if you're competent and you can actually do what it is that they need for you to do within a couple of minutes. Like if you've got a list of 3 or 4 retailers and you're thinking of booking in for a service and you're going to ring all 4, like if you'd have rung us first, you wouldn't ring anybody else because it would just go so well. So we became particularly good at making friends with people. And I think that's, and we didn't really differentiate customers to colleagues. It's like you wouldn't save your best behavior for either or. We just really worked hard on employing people that loved people, that had the ability to make friends within 30 seconds. And we're just keen to just make sure it went well for you. Like, took great pleasure in knowing that it had gone well for a customer. And that's the fascinating bit. And you can build a brilliant business on that.
Yeah, no, Absolutely agree with that. It's the thing I love about doing the used car stuff is actually meeting the people. You don't
Yeah,
you don't get
yeah,
to do much of it when you're sat in front of a computer writing stories like we do most of the time. But actually, when
yeah.
you're out there meeting
Yeah.
people selling cars, I do really enjoy it. What about the stuff that gets you goat? Then is there anything you hate?
Um, no, I think I'm just really passionate about looking at it. If you come out of automotive and take a look down, and you just think, wow, there's got to be a better way of doing it. I just think that everybody works so hard for such a small return on sales, and there are probably easier ways to make money today than retail automotive. And I would, I mean, if it was a 4 or 5% return on business, on sales business, then I think of the things that we could do with it. Like it hasn't really evolved. If you look at other retail spaces, they've evolved so much in terms of the way they go to market and in terms of how they retail. And I would, if I was building retail automotive from scratch, and this is interesting because I was chatting to a Chinese OEM who are amazing in terms of their approach to full circle manufacturing, battery tech, charging tech. They're just, I mean, they do some really, I mean, the cars are brilliant anyway, and clearly come at a great price point, and they're really high quality. But it's the whole sustainable business model that they've got. But what was interesting to me is when it comes to retailing, they're a little bit stuck and they want to choose the traditional model. And I'm like, geez, like, why would you want to do that with such a great innovative product? There must be such a much more exciting way to retail it. And so I think in trying to answer your question, what bothers you, what don't you like? I don't like the way that we retail. I think it could be just so much more fun. And can you imagine? I guess when you look at the investment if you're going to do automotive, you might not start from this position today as a retailer. You might have a much more smaller sales space, a much bigger after sales space. But imagine a 3-car showroom with lots of really interesting tech that you were really immersed in, and a really fun way to just work out, whether it's 3D glasses or virtual reality, or whether it's an Optimus robot, which I think will come, by the way, designed to be full of really interesting product knowledge. And it'd just be a much more fun way to do automotive retail. And I think that's the thing that, I hope that it evolves one day and becomes that, because I think it would be great. And you'd attract so many interesting and different people to automotive in terms of employment, wouldn't you? Because what a really fun way to spend your time working in an environment like that.
It would certainly work quite well in your locations in London, wouldn't it? Those smaller spaces. Give me an idea then of what's next. You sort of hinted there that there might be some conversations going on. I mean, what's next for your company in the UK?
I think that so Hedin Mobility Group is going through a consolidation period as we speak right now. And so it's grown exponentially in the last 5 or 6 years. And it would be really important to consolidate, particularly with how tough automotive is. And so I actually think we'll probably be as we are for a while, if I'm really honest. But I think that doesn't take away my opinions of how I think automotive will evolve over the next 5 to 8 years. I think it'll become a very, very different space.
And lastly, we sort of touched on it during this conversation that there have been some tough years in the motor trade. We've seen some results for 2024. They've been a little bit more positive for some of the dealer groups. What's your take on how 2024 ended, and how do you see 2025 ending?
Well, what an interesting question. It's really difficult looking forward. Why would I say that? Because, like so much changes, as you can see that in the last 3 or 4 weeks. I think also everyone makes that comparison. I think the first thing I would say is results sometimes can come out quite late. So you can file your results, nearly 12 months out from when you actually produce them. And I think that everybody, at the minute are making comparisons to 23, which was the last brilliant year post-COVID. And so it's unrealistic. I mean, your headline, for example, I'm not being critical when I say it, but you might be like, wow, your results have gone back 43%. Well,
You've been told off for that before.
No. But I think the context will be, against unrealistic 21, 2 and 3. But I don't really see. I think that people will fight hard to stand still. Personally, I think you'll see a natural shrinkage of retailers in the network. I do. I think CI improvements will flush a lot of that out, because if you've got a facility, you're already starting to see that. But if you've got a facility that requires £5 million investment and you're scraping to 1% return on sales, you might start to think differently. some of that consolidation and right sizing might just take place naturally. I think that. And I think a good example, Doncaster is a brilliant example, my hometown. So if I took a premium brand that I know quite well in that area, and I look at Sheffield, which is like a 25, 30-minute drive, and you've got this medium-sized retailer in Doncaster, it's like, you don't need that. And the thing is, for the customer, it's a way better day out going to the Starship in Sheffield, where you can see more product and get a better experience. And I think the myth of having something 10 minutes away from your doorstep to gain market share is gone. So I do think, I'm just trying to be mindful of the question that you asked, and how do I see profitability going for retailers in the next few years? I think flat, and I think you'll start to see some people naturally fall away, or maybe refranchise,
Well, Richard, thank you very much for that very interesting insight into the business. I appreciate your honesty. It's been great chatting. And thank you for hanging around for some stories, because we do need to do some of those, John, don't we? We'll be right back. Now, John, I'm really enjoying how easy it is to pay sellers on CarWow.
I presume you'd rather not pay them at all.
No, that is true. But now I can do it with CarWow Wallet. You can pay sellers, finance houses, and more instantly, literally in one click. It's secure, easy to use, and gets rid of all the pesky finance back and forth. It's a total game changer, John.
That does sound pretty good.
If you want to find out more, dealers can log on to carwow.co.uk/partners/carwow-wallet. Now, back to the podcast.
So, James and I are going to run through our favourite stories of the week, and at the end, Richard gets to decide which one of us chose the best ones and who is the winner. Apparently, I won last week, so I'm going to start with a flashback to 2023 and earlier. Cazoo.
I've got one.
Have you?
It was the John O'Hanlon one. I've just been waiting to use it.
It's terrible. Sorry.
I saw it on my desk this morning. I thought, I'm going to have to try and learn to play the kazoo. And that was my try, John. So,
do you know what the saddest thing is? Your actual kazoo sounds nothing like the kazoo noise I've been making for the last 2.5 years on this podcast. But anyway.
I like this one because it's really special. It actually comes with a lanyard.
Oh, wonderful.
Just in case you are worried about losing your kazoo at any period.
Well, I'm just going to move us on now onto actual Cazoo. So this is, as we've described it, failed used car dealer Cazoo and their financial situation laid bare. Because, of course, it hasn't actually gone away, Cazoo. It's been renamed because, of course, Cazoo IP and brand name has been bought by Motors, so that lives on in another form. But all the Cazoo holding companies, of which there were 3, are still working their way through their creditors. And this information has come about via their administrators, Teneo or Teneo, however you say it, updating their company's house records, Cazoo's company house records. So there's a lot of interesting things going on here. The first thing I'll talk about is we've got a breakdown of all the money that Cazoo has recouped, either from selling inventory or selling their IP and so on. So, for example, their brand, tech, and IP, 5 million in total they've managed from selling that to various parties, one of which is Motors, one would imagine. What else is there? £204,000 in inventory realisation, which is selling their transporters and so on, which doesn't seem like a huge amount of money, to be honest. I mean, the amount of transporters they had, if you think about their big lorries as well, goodness knows how much they cost brand new. But the second part of this is the administrators themselves. So Cazoo have been, I keep saying Cazoo, but it's not Cazoo. The remnants of Cazoo have been charged £6 million in administrators' fees so far, which are yet to be paid, says our story, which is quite incredible, really. I mean, I'm not someone that really knows much about administration and picking through financial things of insolvent-ish businesses, but incredible amounts of money that these administrators have been charging. Apparently, it works out at between £918 per hour and £1,023 per hour, which just tells me that really we're in the wrong business, James.
Yeah, we are. We certainly are. That is incredible. And I think the total sum owed by Cazoo £259 million.
Mm.
I mean, that is just a staggering figure, isn't it?
That's
10 million
unsecured debt.
unsecured debt. Yeah, 10 million of it to the taxman.
Mm.
I think some of that. If you am I allowed to jump in? By the way,
Absolutely, yeah,
Sorry.
please do.
I think some of that is relative though, because that IPO'd in 2021 for like 8 billion.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably all relative. I would say that, and I think it probably just is indicative of the mess that has been left behind. And administrators won't be shy in charging, will they?
No.
But I do think it's, I don't even think that the valuation at 8 billion. If you look at BYD with a market cap of like 145 billion US dollars, Tesla $1 trillion, Toyota at 220-ish million. Billion. So it's not. I think that people saw Cazoo as, and I think also it's interesting that it IPO'd in the States. They're less risk averse. And I think when you start to look at company valuations and you're trying to find the next biggest thing, I think it's all relative. And I think why we find Cazoo so fascinating, I think lots of us thought it was doomed, and we didn't think that business model would work from the start.
Are you surprised? Are you surprised it failed, or not surprised in the size?
No, I think lots of industry commentators weren't surprised. I think as soon as it went with that valuation, I think in the UK 8 billion looks a lot, but I think if you look at where it IPO'd, 8 billion is not. And if you look at the market caps, as I just mentioned, of those OEMs, and this is just in the used car space, I think that people thought coming out of COVID that you could pretty much do everything without a person, and you could do it all on the net without all the cost. But going back to that Bain research that I'd spoken to you about earlier, where customers are real advocates of single price points, it was also really interesting to read that I think it's 90-something% of customers would do 90% of their research online. This is for a new car, by the way. Would want that 10% of their journey would finish in store. So 90% would be online, 10% in store. And that was all around trust, connection, confidence with a retailer, particularly if something were to go wrong, where would I go? And I'm like, well, if that's for a new car, you're definitely going to feel like that about a used car. And I think that was a large part of it. And so I'm not surprised, but I think the valuation, the numbers, even the amount that's outstanding now that you guys are talking about, I think it's all relative, to be honest.
Yes, I'm sure. Not the best of news, though. Let us move on, shall we? I will go with my first story, and that is news from Vertu, the sole listed car dealer group left on the stock market. They had their AGM this week, and as part of that, issued a trade-in update, which was full of some interesting nuggets of information, John. Stuff like, I'm going to start off with their used car sales. So we're talking about the period, I think it's the first, I think from the end of their financial year to now. So I think they end their financial year end of Feb. So it's the first couple of months. They said used car sales have dropped 3.8% in those 3 months. Motability sales were down 23.2%. So, I mean, they were the negative points, but actually there was a lot of positives in this. New car sales in that period were up an impressive 7%. Vertu said they outperformed the UK new car market, which grew 5.6% over that same period. So they were obviously doing better. They said their after sales departments, where they make high margin service revenues, they said they were up 4.1% compared to the same period last year, and fleet and commercial vehicle sales were up too. So a lot of positivity there. I do like Vertu's updates because, as we know, John, they're always very straight and down the line, aren't they? And very, very to the point. And I mean, let's put it this way: very Robert Forrester. And these certainly were. There were no profitability numbers. They didn't actually reveal how they've got on in their first 3 months. But you will remember in May they revealed profit for last year. Had fallen 15.8% to 29.3 million on revenues of 4.8 billion. So that's last year. They're saying this year, that first 3 months are in line with market expectations, and they are, their words, encouraged by the start of this 2026 financial year. Robert Forrester said, It's encouraging start to the year, balanced by ongoing headwinds of a challenging consumer and business environment and the government's ZEV mandate promoting accelerated electric car adoption. We know he's not a big fan of the ZEV mandate, our Robert Forrester, is he? But yeah, an interesting set of an update there, John. I like it because we always get a little bit of an insight into how things are going. There's not many listed businesses left on the stock market, as you know. So a little glimmer of an insight there from Vertu is always useful. What did you think?
I'm not going to say much about this because I don't think I'm the most qualified person in the room to be talking about financial information of dealer groups somehow.
No, so. I think you're probably right, Richard. I won't ask you to, for your comments in particular on Vertus, but I mean, just you probably read these sorts of updates and just go, well, how are we doing in comparison to those guys, or do you?
Well, I think no, I wouldn't really, because I think that our business, yeah, you do a little bit. No, that's not true to say, but I just think that if you look at the size of Vertu compared to our UK Hedin business, it's quite different. But I'm with you, James, actually, that I do think that the Vertu announcements are particularly fascinating because it's the only one you get.
Yeah.
And so you can have a really good look and get a real feel for it. I think it's a really well-run company. I think it's really stable. Look at the share price. I think it's really consolidated in the last 6 months, around 65p a share. It doesn't really move much, so the markets clearly believe in it. And it's very diverse, though, isn't it, in terms of the amount of franchises that it's got. And looking at Robert's commentary, I wouldn't know because I've not spoken to him about it, but it's clear that they see after sales as a really more, reliable side of the business, more consistent. And it is by its very nature. And that's the bit that you really want to try and grow, because you're not really involved in those challenging market cycles as you are in sales. I think after sales is a really important part of the business that can just help shore up profitability. So no, I think Vertu, you would say, really well run company, very stable, very diverse, and as you said, James, just it's always fascinating to read what's going on. But I do think I would just, my only caution for anything automotive result wise in 25 is that Q1, I think on reflection, was a pull forward market. And I think that even other industries are saying in Q1, it was a surprise to them to see how buoyant it actually was. Q2 hasn't felt the same. And so you just think, well, all eyes on Q3 and 4. But Q1, I would just say, I'd be cautionary and just say, I think that really did now on reflection look like a pull forward market. And it's not the same in Q2.
Robert Forrester is not a huge fan of the ZEV mandate. I think it's probably fair to say. I mean, what's your take on it? I mean, bear in mind we haven't got the huge amount of time, but what's your?
No, I think I'll try and answer quickly. I just think there's a massive dislocation between government understanding and what's actually going on, and I think there's a few things that really I find frustrating. I think the first thing is that it's clearly not a natural climb, and if you were to say what's the natural market, well, that's like 15%. We're pushing it now to 20. That's hard enough. We're never going to hit 28. We're never going to hit 80 by 2030. So it just needs a longer runway, at least. I think we'll see other technologies come into play over the next 5 to 10 years. If you look at the investments that Germany are making in hydrogen, particularly, and check out RTM Power. They're a UK-based PLC, one of the fastest growing companies in the UK into electrolyzer, green hydrogen technology. And they're making some huge investments in Germany, actually, as well as the UK. So governments are starting to invest heavily in hydrogen. So I think that will also run alongside electric. But I think that the biggest thing that bothers me about electric is that, you look at these colossal machines emitting shed loads of carbon to dig up precious metals, to build batteries. And then you look at the UK, as a stat last year, the UK imported 25% of all its electricity from France. And bearing in mind, it takes near on 10 years to build a nuclear power station. You're never going to catch up on being able to produce that much electricity. And so my fear is there are like 1 million EVs on the road today. So if in a 2 million car market, let's just say half are electric, it won't take you long to be 5, 6, 7 million EVs on the road, and we don't have enough green electricity for them. And so if the electricity weren't to be green and it was, from a coal-fired power station or something like that, then what are you really achieving? But it's breaking businesses, whether it's retailers or OEMs. And so I do think, governments will wind back. But it's like when? Because we're bleeding like really heavily. And if you just look at Germany and some of their legacy OEMs, so like they employ in Germany like near on 1 million people. So the minute you start to see that wobble, will that be the excuse that governments need to wind back on their mandates? Maybe. And you could imagine the EU might go first and then the UK might go second. But something's got to give. But the longer it takes, the more everybody's bleeding, which is a real shame.
Yeah. Well, John, over to you. You'll go.
Okie doke. I feel like we have to talk about Peter Waddell.
Oh, I'm glad you are, because I was going to steer very clear of this one.
I knew you'd do that. So this is the news that Peter Waddell is back in the news, and surprisingly, in the Guardian, of all places.
Your favourite newspaper, John?
It is my favourite newspaper, and for non-readers of the Guardian, like James, we've helpfully regurgitated all of it onto our website into one easily manageable news story.
You're welcome.
But I couldn't quite work out if this was an interview with the Guardian or the Guardian doing a general piece around this. It's a bit, they've got a photo of him credited to the Guardian, which suggests they've been in his house and taken a photo of him next to his grand piano. But
it was strange, wasn't it? I don't think
it is very strange.
No, not real loads of quotes in there, was there? Anything?
No. But the kind of crux of this piece, aside from all there's a lot going on here. There's all the allegations against Peter Waddell, from Fresh Stream and from Big Motoring World employees and so on and so forth, which just, unfortunately, I wouldn't say they keep coming, but we keep getting further gritty details of what those allegations are, which are, I'm not going to repeat on the podcast. There's some words on the website I won't put in audio form. There's that going on. There's news around all his various bits of litigation that he's got going on, which now look like they're going to take place next year, suggests the Guardian anyway, this High Court case. But what this Guardian piece focuses on is the role of investment companies and the likes of Fresh Stream Capital, and the way that they operate once they take over a business like Big Motoring World. So Peter Waddell would allege that Fresh Stream, I'm going to paraphrase Peter Waddell, this is not exactly what he's saying, but as far as he's concerned, they're the enemy. They've come in and forced him out of his company that he built up from nothing. And what Fresh Stream would allege is that they've come in, expecting lots of growth, and discovered that there's misconduct going on in the company and that he's the figurehead of it, and therefore they need to remove him. And part of this all focuses on at the minute is there was the way that Peter Waddell was pushed out of the company, as he would say, is there was a misconduct investigation carried out by a solicitor. And Peter Waddell alleges that there was so much information in this misconduct, it's a 176-page misconduct investigation. He wasn't given, and his solicitors were not given, adequate time to actually respond to it. So in effect, he was found guilty in absence because he wasn't given time to respond. And Fresh Stream would say, well, we needed to do this really quickly. This is why we didn't give him time to respond, or more time to respond, because he's the figurehead of the company, and if he's a problem, we need to cauterize the wound, so to speak, and deal with it there and then. But it's an interesting piece in the Guardian because it's 80% about Peter Waddell and Big Motoring World, but at the end, there's a sort of little nub of the Guardian has spoken to 4 other British founders of startup businesses who wish to remain anonymous, but make similar claims that various investors had attempted to oust them from their companies. And I remember at the time when this all sort of kicked off, and there were much fewer details out and about, the news that he'd been removed from his position. Obviously, he's still not an investor. He's still got a lot of stock shareholder in the business. Yeah, exactly. Having been removed from his position, he was, very irate about that. It's how has this happened? How have they managed to force him out? And I remember us having a conversation about it, James. But it wouldn't surprise me if this is not an uncommon situation.
No, I agree. I agree with you there, and I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there. I mean, this is the part of the story that is probably the telling bit. I think Peter would argue that this was the plan all along. I would suspect that the investment company has come in, they've taken a minority shareholding and have worked out a way of muscling themselves in, allegedly, to get hold of the company, and they've done that by coming up with these trumped up charges. that's Peter's opinion. God, it's hard work, this, isn't it?
I know, yeah.
It's hard work. That is I think that's the kind of the rub of it. Really, is Peter thinks that they've just tried to take the company from him, but they would say that his conduct was not up to what it should be as a CEO of that business. I think it will be fascinating to see how this plays out, because we've seen lots of little parts of this, lots of little arguments in court up until this point, but we haven't seen the big case. And that big case is going to, well, it's not going to look great for both sides, is it?
No, and this is the thing. I also think if I were in Peter Waddell's shoes, as he was when he was forced out, he was, I don't think I'm wrong in saying, not far away from thinking about taking retirement. He sort of suggested that's what he's at. He didn't want to do it forever. He wanted to enjoy, the final years of his life in Spain on his yacht or whatever. And this is it's a bit like the end of Top Gear, isn't it? They were probably going to end it 2 or 3 years later. And then you're forced out and suddenly you find, actually, I want to carry on for a bit longer.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of what's happened here. But the more articles there are and the more stuff that gets revealed in court, the more painful it's going to be. So if I were him, I would have just let it go and said, I've had my millions. Painful as it is to see your company in different hands and maybe not doing the things that you would have done yourself, I would let go.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we'll subject Richard to having a comment on that.
I think I was just enjoying you two square, making sure you didn't say anything about where you might get sued.
Hopefully we've done it. We're running this through the lawyers or ChatGPT before we pop the pictures.
Hard to fill in the blanks, though.
Yeah, right. Let me move us on because this week was our Car Dealer Power survey, and I'd just like to talk a little bit about the winners and losers of that survey. Now, this is where we ask our dealer readers to mark their manufacturers in terms of what they like to represent. This year, there's been some surprises in that. I'll come on to that in a moment. We also talk about the best suppliers to do business with, which I found fascinating because a lot of them I do actually use at the Clever Car Collection, and I can testify that they are actually very, very good. So it's been nice to see that some of the people that we use are also celebrated by all of their other customers in our survey. But the one that I just want to talk about here is those manufacturers. The big surprise to me was Ford. They finished absolute plumb last in this year's survey. We asked their dealers to rate them in 13 different categories. There's a variety of things from finance, marketing, accessibility of the manufacturer's team, to everything to new car supply, used car supply. The full details are on the website. But then out of that, we work out a score out of 100. So they get 100% if they get full marks and everything. And then obviously it changes depending on that. So Ford scored 59.2% from its dealers this year. They were particularly upset with the manufacturer's requirements and return on investment. Now, the Ford network has changed dramatically over the last few years. It's near enough halved in size. They haven't been particularly quick when it comes to launching EVs, I think it's probably fair to say, which has probably cheesed off a few of these dealers. And they're not very happy. They dropped 10 places in the survey this year, so very disappointing for Ford and its retailers. Honda fell eight places to finish second from bottom, and Citroen was third from bottom. They dropped 5 places in this year's survey, so some disappointing results. But let's focus on some positives, John. BMW were top this year. They rose 3 places. Why are you laughing at me?
No, it's just from our guest there.
Oh, was it? Oh, sorry, I missed that. BMW were top, 84.3%. They scored fantastically in brand awareness in their used cars section and also the return on investment. So some very happy BMW retailers out there. Nice to see them move up the chart this year. They finished 3rd place last year. They've always been in the top half, but yeah, nice for them to actually finally win. They were very happy. We spoke to Debbie McIntosh, the sales director for the UK, and she was absolutely delighted. She said it's an amazing and fantastic recognition for us, and really means so much because it's voted for by our retail partners. So she was clearly very, very happy, and nice to see a different name at the top this year. So yeah, interesting. BMW at the top there. I think it was then Toyota and then Kia. Other notable achievements this year, Chinese brand MG. They jumped 16 places. I forgot they were on the bottom last year. They finished last, and they rose 16 places to 9th, so right up into the top 10. And BYD was the other one that I found really interesting. They rose 10 places to finish 5th, which is a massive achievement for those two brands. Yeah, but nice to see. I mean, it's BMW, very, very good result. Clearly got a guest who represents them, and I'm sure you probably agree, Richard, with those results.
I think, that they're just. Do you know the thing about BMW? Obviously, I've known them for 15 years, but they're just so easy to deal with, and they're really accessible. They've got a great CEO in David George. Debbie McIntosh does a brilliant job, but I think David's just got a really good exec team, and just full of people that like people. And it's just when it's like that, it just makes things so much easier.
And can't remember. Was it Chris Brownridge before? Is that his
name?
Yeah. He's gone off to head up Rolls Royce, isn't he?
That's right. Yeah.
He was in position for quite some time, and I'm pretty sure he had a retailer background, didn't he?
I don't know.
I'm not sure whether he did or not, but I just wonder whether that was kind of. We've had the stable leadership at the top for BMW for some time, and he was very well regarded.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say with BMW is the products are good, aren't they? And you've got a really broad range with broad range of powertrains as well. There's kind of something for everyone in there, I think.
Yeah, loads of heritage and all the things that you say are right. And I'm not surprised to see people like MG and BYD do well on there. And I think what's interesting is BYD get all the headlines, but if you look at MG's market share this year, they've sold something like 35,000 cars so far. And if you look at BYD, interestingly, only as much as Cooper and Mazda. Yeah. So, and the other, and I know we haven't got much time left, but the interesting thing about BYD is I get the growth is really interesting to people. I get the market cap also being valued at 145 billion. Well, that's interesting because Mercedes-Benz, VW and BMW will be around 50 billion USD. So it's got a big valuation, big growth, but it's yet to get to that hurdle, hasn't it, of doing what the likes of MG are doing. And then the next hurdle is doing what the likes of Mercedes-Benz and BMW are doing. And if you look at the headlines this week, they're rolling back on production and they're pausing their plans to expand. And you just think, well, they're probably going to start to experience the cost of push, aren't they, right now? And so, and everyone talk. I mean, I think they built something like 4.6 million cars last year. Not that difficult to do if you're in a China market that has 1.3 billion people living there. So I think, again, I'm not saying they won't do well, am I? I'm just saying an interesting story, one to watch. But when you look at the core data, that they're still have sold 50% of what MG have sold. So I'm not surprised to see MG rank highly with that volume if you're an MG retailer.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I find the BYD story fascinating and been following it very closely. And they do take up all the headlines, like you say, but I think it's a lot to do with their ambitions. And I think
and their marketing spend and, so on and so forth. I mean, the other thing I'll say about MG is they would say themselves, they really take the UK into consideration in terms of R&D and all that sort of stuff. And I think a lot of Chinese car makers don't. They kind of just go, right, here's our car for export. Off it goes. See how it does.
Yeah, everyone's backing BYD to be brilliant, but will it be? I suppose is my only point.
We'll see. We will see. John, I mean, we've sort of run out of time, haven't we?
I think we have. I won't try and squeeze one more in. So, Richard, before I ask for your verdict, are there any stories you think we should have talked about this week, but we haven't?
No, I think just to get the BYD data and my comment on that in now has probably been something I wanted to just mention. But no, the rest of it I thoroughly enjoyed, and you guys have been great company, so thanks for inviting me on.
Oh, you're very kind. Well, I'm going to have to ask you, what was your favourite story? Who's your winner?
Well, the viewers can't see this. They can only listen to it. But if you were sat where I were, the Peter Waddell story was only just great entertainment because of how carefully you were both treading around it in the hope that you wouldn't get sued. Because he's clearly spent a lot of time with his lawyers in the last 12 months.
Yeah, and I mean, if we're not back next week, you know what's happened.
I'll be on my own.
Terrible way to end. I mean, is that a win for me, though?
It looks that way. It does look
that way. I think a shared win if you could see what I could see. There we go.
We'll fight that one out between us next week. Let's see who wants to
toss
go
a coin.
first. Well, all that's left for me to say is thank you to Richard for coming on today. It's been lovely to have you on, and your
Big
insight.
pleasure. Yeah, big pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. And thank you as well to James.
You're welcome.
For something.
Being here. Putting up with this once again.
Yeah.
Just all of the above.
Paying me, etc., etc. And thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode. So make sure you're subscribed so you'll be notified when that goes live. Don't forget to book tickets for Car Dealer Podcast Live. Link is in the show notes below. And you can use the discount code PICANTO for 10% off.
Great.
Just to say that only works on Car Dealer Podcast Live tickets, not on Kia Picantos from the Clever Car Collection.
Definitely not.
Because, as James says, I don't set the prices. Auto Trader does. If you want to check out the stories mentioned today, take a look in the show notes below, or head to cardealermagazine.co.uk. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.